Right. We're glad you're here. The meeting is now open, and I would like to introduce our speaker, and that is Arthur J.
Thank you. Thank you. I really am overwhelmed with all the people here. Thank you for the support. And
We love you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it was right. I'm always, whenever I start a meeting off, I'm an addict, and I always like to remind you people. I started using dope in 1961, just before my 18th birthday, and the first drug I ever tried was heroin. You know, and there wasn't a lot of smorgasbord of drugs like it is today. But why I'm bringing this up is, at that time, Narcotics Anonymous was not available like it is today. We are very, very fortunate when we read. We do recover. We are blessed that we have NA. And I'm not going to try to get too involved. But I came from old-fashioned recovery, which is when you basically got busted, you kicked in the cells, and you gave them any shit, they beat you with clubs and threw you in the hole. And that's the way you recover. And if you had a lot of money, you could go to one of them sanitariums for your nerves. I mean, really. The only kick hospital in the country at that time was Lexington. You can check this all out on your computers. And in the inner cities, the main, there were 72-hour, they called them Metropolitan State Hospitals. They had them in major Chicago, LA, New York, and that. And you could go there and bring your habit down. And people were not as drug aware as they are now. And at that time, you could also it's amazing. I don't know why they make movies out of junkies' lifestyle, but they do, you know. And mine was pretty much the famous one with Al Pacino, Panic in Needle Park up on Amsterdam Avenue in Manhattan. And the bad news about the world of drugs in Manhattan is drugs was very reasonably priced, and there was lots of it, and it was called China White. And, you know, consequently, you could go for, it's easy to steal stuff and sell dope, and you consequently could go for a long time before you got arrested. And the bad news was when you got busted, you had a habit and you were going to kick, and that's all there was to it. And it's wonderful now. They have Narcotics Anonymous. I remember when I got out of the joint in 1966, I went back to New York. I did time in a southern prison down south, the old-fashioned South. I'm not a racist in any way, shape, or form, but it was still had the colored and white signs and worked for Captain Green and Boss Carter and all this shit. It was just, you know, it was just a total different world. And I'm talking that's 50 years ago. But anyway, when I went back to New York, I immediately started slamming. And I remember my aunt let me stay at the house, a very nice lady. And I was basically copping out to her. When you were a junkie at that time, it wasn't like you were a sick person. You were ashamed of your family. It was, you know. I mean, I remember I tried to, at one point, join like the army to get off the streets. And I had already been busted for possession, of narcotics. And the guy at the recruiting said, they really look like really down on this. They classify you in the same level they do sex perverts and shit. I'm serious. That's what he told me that. That was like in 1962 and that. So why I'm telling you all this is just to let you know how fortunate you are today to have these meetings and to have people here. Well, anyway, I said to my aunt, I wish there was somebody I could talk to. And she, being a nice Christian lady, said, you want to talk to the priest and such. No, and where I mainly bring this up, I do it every time I chair, just to let you know there is somebody to talk to today. You can walk in, there's NA all over. I've been in Guam and Hawaii, different areas in the continental United States, and Narcotics Anonymous is available. And that's a true, true blessing. So always keep in mind of that. We've grown. I mean, I remember in Auburn, to be honest with you, I had 3 years of recovery, and there was no NA there. You had to search out meetings. They were down in Sacramento. And we only had one meeting a week on Thursday night, and they didn't have it was Betty who asked me, you guys know Betty, she asked me if I'd like to come over and get an NA chip, and I said, what, a bunch of kids talking about pot and shit? And she said, no, come on over. So I went over, they didn't even have a 3-year chip. They gave me a cup from the 1984 convention, Northern California Convention. And I kind of hate to say this, but I gave that cup to there was somebody I thought was going to stick around, and he had celebrated 3 years. I thought I'd honor him with that cup, but anyway, I don't see him around too much. But anyway, that's my take on NA, and I hope you realize just how fortunate we are today. You know, it's not looked on as a crime like it was at one time. You know, and we do have places to talk to. And yeah, this old man told me when I first walked into a recovery room, I was a lot younger then, and he says, you know, we know more about you than you know about yourself. I said, Peter, this on you, man. What are you talking about? And the reality was, he was absolutely right. When you walk in that door, we know who you are. You don't realize that. It took me a long time to realize what he was saying. Because it takes one to know one. We're addicts. We all have the same kind of thinking. Or I put it this way, we're the only people who like to argue with people who are not there. So, I mean, see, we all laugh at that. There must be a reason for that. There's a connection there, isn't it? To the disease of addiction that settles up here. And I don't want to get into a drug-a-log, but trust me, I'm an old-fashioned dope feeder. That dope dropped on the gas station bathroom floor or the barroom bathroom floor. I'm scraping it up. And the people with me are saying, oh, good, you got it all. And we justify that kind of behavior because there's a piece of cotton in there or something. And this is our second step in action. That's total insane. Absolutely insanity. It's also our first step. It's total powerlessness. Total under the control of that powder. You know, we talk about having some faith in the first three steps. Talk about willingness, open-mindedness, and honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And, you know, we all have faith as fiends. We really do. You know, we hook up with somebody, and me and Ryan hook up and say, yeah, I know the guy. We give him $100. We got faith he's going to come back. Right? We got faith he's going to bring us this powder, because I like powder dope. We're going to put it in a cooker and shoot it. That's incredible faith. It's also a form of madness. So when you walk in here and we say, have a little faith in what we're talking about here, this is a real deal. This program works if you work at it. And that famous line, if you just put half of the effort you put into using into this program, you'll come out okay. When I first came in, all I was capable of was going to meetings. I had a true desire to stop, and I went to the first meeting. I was loaded on Dilaudid. I went to that first meeting, and I liked the meeting. I didn't know what they were really talking about, but I liked the meeting. And I put it together that if I go to these meetings, I can get 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4. You know, and I could sit there like this waiting to go to a meeting. And finally this guy reached out to me. He actually was my first sponsor, Bill. And he offered me a seat and he wanted some coffee. And anyway, he made me feel at home. And, you know, I was all loaded, and I mean, trying to come off of dope, no rehab and nothing. I was all nervous and jammed up inside. You know, all these people and stuff like that. And anyway, he made me feel at home. So anyway, I went to the meeting, and when I would go into the meeting, I'd look for him to make sure he was there. And I kept hearing people say, get a sponsor, get a sponsor. They didn't tell me how you got one. They just said, get one. And they weren't going to, it was a smaller group then, and they were not going around with a list. So naturally I asked Bill, I says, you want to be my sponsor? And he laughed, and he gave me a book. And then he made me some suggestions to me. He says, I suggest you take a shower every day. He says, you remember Bill T. Arthur? Yeah. He says, I suggest you try to eat 3 meals a day. And you'd go to a meeting every day, and you call me every day, and try to read a page in this book a day. I thought, what has this got to do with stopping using, you know? And I was married at the time, and I went home, and the old lady was there. She said, you go to your meeting? I said, yeah. She said, what happened? I said, I got a sponsor. She says, you did? I said, yeah, he told me to take a shower. And so, anyway, she said, that's not a bad idea, you know. So, anyway, why I'm telling you this is, you know, this stuff doesn't, I hear these guys, I'm walking in here, they got 30 days and they're doing, you know, they did the steps already and all that. I mean, it just sunk into me slow. I was too, whatever it was, too out of it. You know, I didn't understand. Then I heard the dreaded word God. And I thought, oh, shit. And I asked Bill, I said, what's this God stuff, you know? And he said, this is a spiritual program. I had also heard honesty. And, and I was going home that night, and I thought, in all honesty, I believed in something. There's spiritual forces in the universe. And I also heard somebody put it to me really simple, good orderly direction. And that worked for me really well. Because I was up to no good. There was no order in my life, but what was my direction? Jails, institutions. So, that made sense to me. And then I started, getting into this God thing. And finally I asked Bill, I says, what am I supposed to do, pray myself clean? And he said, yeah. And he gave me a card with the Serenity Prayer on it. And, and then I started, going to the meetings and getting more involved and talking with more people. I always have came early and stayed late. And if you're new here or you're just coming back or whatever, you'll notice that the people who are recovered and have recovery time in the program, 90% of them come early and stay late. There's a reason we do that. I started doing that when I got here. And you'll also find people who have been here a while are involved in service. This program is really a lot of fun when you look at it. We win by surrendering. We get power by admitting we're powerless. And we receive by giving. And actually those three things are spiritual axioms or whatever the word is that describes that. And it gives us this order, this good orderly direction in our life. Anyway, the thing that impressed me and had the biggest effect on my life in recovery was when I did a third step with Bill. And it was, to be honest with you, it was, we did it on our knees the old-fashioned way. I do that with sponsors all the time. And in my mind, it was to whom it may concern. And I did that third step. I felt kind of stupid, but I did it. And the thing was, the next day, I felt different. And the absolute, what got me my attention the most was a week or so after that I realized I wasn't sitting there white-knuckling it and, trying to get through the day without fixing. And that really encouraged me. Now, the bad news for me was I was doing all this service stuff and getting known around the program and all that, and I couldn't seem to get through step 4. And then I got hooked up with the sponsor I had for 30 years. He passed away 3 years ago, and, he was the one who got me through step 4. We redid the steps, and he more or less took me by the hand, so to speak, and guided me through this. Took me to these men's retreats, showed me, and he died, God bless him, with 50 years of recovery. And to be honest with you, until he wound up in the hospital dying from some kind of disease, he was involved in service the whole time he was clean. The whole time. Always had something going on. Book studies, and I'm the same way. He got me into going to step meetings. And the reason I went to step meetings and study meetings is I was trying to figure out what are we talking about. Really. And, I'm not, maybe it's because I don't have an 8th grade education or something, but, I just couldn't understand what are we talking about here. And the textbook example of the 12 steps is for you as a recovering addict is to develop a degree of humility so the grace of a high power of God of your understanding can come into your life and remove this obsession for madness, thus restore you to sanity. And the behavior we exhibited when we're out there using is not the behavior we exhibit while we're clean. And the rest of it is just more or less one foot in front of the other and learning through mistakes. I came in here, I didn't know it at the time, I was just so angry, and the anger had a lot to do with fear and all that. And the other thing was the us and them trip. We were the outlaws, we were the hard asses, we knew what was happening. And other people, anybody who wasn't in on our side was fucked up, was screwed up. I'm supposed to watch my language. And I remember one time during the party years, we were down in Sacramento, and we'd been up on, I wasn't doing any heroin, so we were doing crank and drinking cheap wine all night. And it was like 7 o'clock in the morning type of thing. We're sitting on that park bench by Wino Park, and, all the traffic's going to work and that. There was about 4 of us sitting there, and our conversation was that we're the salt of the earth, we're the smart ones, we know what's happening, you know, and all those people in cars and shit going to work are fucked up. And you know, the reality of that is it's so insane. I mean, why I bring it up a lot is maybe you can relate to it, I don't know, but is I believe that kind of stuff. I mean, that's where I was at when I came here. And the other reality was I didn't know how to write checkbooks. I didn't know how to keep a license or any of that stuff. You know, I had an old lady, and, you know, she did all that. I didn't know any of that. And then the other side of it was I was afraid to do that stuff. You know, fear is our biggest, the resentment and fear and anger. I mean, those are the three major defects that will haunt us and that we have to work through in a lot of areas. You know, the obvious ones, you know, are pretty obvious, but I mean the deeper ones. You know, and it's a fear-based disease. It's also a disease of the emotions. That's why I say we argue with people who are not there, and, you know, and all this, we take everything serious. You know, my brother, I had a real blessing this week. My brother, who I hadn't seen in 20 years, came to visit me, and we were sitting around and talking about lots of things, and I mentioned some, you know, wacko behavior that existed when we were kids. And he, you know, he's not an addict or an alkie. He said, hey, that was 60 years ago. See, he isn't haunted with that stuff. The other thing he did was he bought 4 little bottles of wine about that big, and he said to me, do you mind if I have a glass of wine? I said, no. And I'm thinking, who wants a glass of wine? Yeah. But anyway, yeah, I mean, yeah, right, that don't make any sense. But I thought I'd share that with you guys because we can relate to that type of thing. That's what makes us different, man. There's a chemical thing. I read a lot on this stuff. I always read something on recovery. I've been reading things on recovery on a daily basis for a long, long time. And you get a lot of information. And it basically says that we have something inside us, a chemical thing in us, that the minute we ingest a drug or alcohol, immediately I want more comes in. You know, everybody goes to a kegger party in the summer when you're in school. We want to stay there 24/7. And, you know, and that's what it is about us. You know, and the good news is by getting involved in this program of recovery, we can learn to live a day at a time and have a sensible, basically ordinary life. You know, and it's a good life. What we get from working the steps in that is it's an outlook on life, and it's a thing that everything's going to be all right. You know, I was diagnosed, a lot of you know, with terminal stage 4 cancer of the lung and all this stuff. And first of all, I don't look sick. Second of all, I'm not afraid or worried about it. I'm in total acceptance, which gives me peace. And I certainly have my gratitude for everything I've been given. And that's because of this program. I'm not going to bemoan my fate. You know, and the program gives you that. It's part of the process of being clean a day at a time, of having a God in your life. You know, whenever I run into a problem and I'm getting goofy with it, I realize that I bring my higher power into this equation, that I bring God into the equation. And then I realize I'm on self-will, and I'm getting all jammed up. And I need the help of a power greater than myself to sustain me, because as they say, life gets too big for us. You know, and that's why you got to stay with this program. If you relate it to a lot of the stuff I'm talking about, scraping dope up off of bathroom floors, drinking into blackouts, taking Quaaludes and running in the nude and all that, if you relate to that stuff, you got a serious problem. Really. And there's a way out. I mean, you know, it's not a joke thing or an inconvenience, these meetings. These meetings will turn our lives around, man. They'll give us a way to go. You know, and it works. And the nicest thing about it is, this year in March I'll celebrate 34 years. And no, it's not March yet. The way I'm saying that is I'm still excited about my recovery. That's the legacy. I was not excited about my using. I was not excited about all that. But I'm still, and I'm really convinced of this, if you work this program the way it's designed to be, and once you get into the double digits, it's 10, 11, and 12. I mean, that's where it's at with me. And usually when I find, quote, somebody with a double digit moaning and groaning, it's because they're theoretically not working 10, 11, and 12. And we were talking about that on the way over here, and how it's so imbued in myself that if I'm up for a half hour in the morning and I haven't sat down and did step 11, I start to feel guilty, you know. And it centers me and it puts me in the right direction. Remember, we're here for God's purpose. He's not here for us. I need a job, God. I need a car, God. I need a woman, God. I need a man, whatever. It doesn't work that way. You know, and that's what the beauty of this is when you work the steps and you do this program, and what's the outcome of it? What's the payoff? To be a maximum service to God and to man. That's really what the ultimate thing is for this. And that's a heck of an order for selfish, crazed dope fiends. You know, it really. And it doesn't happen overnight. You just got to keep putting one foot in front of the other and do this to the best of your ability. The simplicity of the program is you don't pick up, you don't use. I did not come here, I kind of hate that expression, you don't have to use it if you don't want it or something like that. I didn't come here to find an excuse to use. I came here to stop using. And then I found out as I did a little bit of this step work that I started feeling better about myself. And when I felt better about myself, my neighbor was really a nice person. He was not off the hook, and he was not a cop car or any of that. He was really a nice guy, you know. But that was the changes as it comes, you know. And then you realize, like, there's a spiritual axiom: if I'm arguing with somebody else, I'm as wrong as they are. You know, and resentment is just the main thing that'll kill us, is getting upset and not giving up a resentment, digging our feet in. I will not give this up. That's the warning on our defects. And anyway, the big ball with the steps is what I did the amends. And I basically, a lot of traveling around the country, a lot of crime and all that stuff. So I found out that I could do, my sponsor suggested I give money to certain organizations and things like that, kind of like a tie thing if you're a church person. And he said that would be the best way to handle it. And the best was when I made amends with my family. And I always get emotional when I talk about that, so I try to avoid it. But it had been, let me drink here, Chris. The 9th step, the 8th is our list. The 9th step is the work, and that's where the healing begins. That's where you're walking on that broad spiritual highway. You're on a narrow road, but the highway is very broad, and that's when it starts to happen for you. And you know, that's why you shouldn't miss out on it. But anyway, I've been 25 years since I had a physical contact with my brother and 2 sisters. Every time I mention this step, it's crazy. Every time I mention this, I get emotional about it. But it was a healing. You know, now we talk to each other like my brother visiting me and such. You know, I mean, my sister was at a point where when I came to her house, she'd open the door in a crack and, listen, if you don't leave, I'm going to call the cops. You know, and things like that. And, you know, and it took some phone calls, and it took, you know, some different things. And I realized it was good for them, too, because they weren't that they hated me, they were afraid of me. Because what did I bring to them? Fear and possibly violence. I didn't bring anything else. So as, you know, as I progressed with this communicating with them, and then finally had physical, you know, thing, it was just like in the, you know, in the TV shows. It wasn't a dry eye. We were all, you know, overwhelmed with each other. And that was one of them. There was a few others too, like, but not quite as dramatic as that. And I got to see one of my adult relatives. I had aunts and a mom and all that. And she was in I shared this picture with somebody. She was an old woman in a wheelchair, like 80-something years old, in a nursing home. And all my relatives on my sister's side, they were all paisanos, Italians, Sicilianos to be straight. And I remember distinctly, if you're familiar with the Italian culture, they said, well, what do you want to go, her name was Aunt Kay. She said, what do you want to go see Aunt Kay for? She's an old woman, she won't recognize her. I said, yeah, but she's my godmother. Oh, make her, right away, make her. We didn't get there quick, so. But the reality was, to be honest with you, the lady probably didn't even know I was there. But I was able to, do the best I could with that amends. She was the only surviving relative, and it was good for my heart, and it was fortunate, in that sense. So, this program is, you got to just do it to the best of your ability. It's not a contest on how we can stay clean the longest or who can be the most spiritual and all this. It's a program of living. And we do learn to live. You know what book tells us? What we knew about living almost killed us. It's right there in our basic text. So we start from the bottom and work our way up. And I'm going to cut, it's 9:30, we can have a half hour. There are a lot of people in this room I'd like to hear from. So I'm going to cut it short. I want to thank you. I'm overwhelmed with the support I got here. I mean, thank you. And anyway, I'm going to start calling on people. And I gotta break it with you in there.